Hello my treasures, all the cards for the Great Dark Beyond have been revealed, so that means let's go over the other half of the cards that I haven't talked about yet. We're going to be starting with the newest cards first, and then going with the oldest ones last. So let's begin. Alright, now for the Paladin cards. We're going to start off with Celestial Aura, a 6-cost holy spell that while you have exactly one minion in play, its attack and health are 10. Last 3 turns. This should, in theory, be able to be comboed out with Amidus on a perfect curve. However, outside of that, I think this card it might be a little bit too slow. But let's get on to the more interesting cards. Librams return to Hearthstone with Libram of Divinity, a 4-cost holy spell that gives a minion +3/+3. If this costs a 0, return this to your hand at the end of the turn. And you're wondering, how are we going to discount this card? Well, we have access to Interstellar Star Slicer, which is a 3-cost weapon with the Battlecry and Death Rattle reduce the cost of your Librams by 1 this game. And then we also have Interstellar Wayfarer that has the Battlecry of reducing the cost of your Librams by 1 this game. And then we have some draw power for Librams in the form of Libram of Clarity that draws 2 minions. If this costs 0, give them +2/+1. And hot off the presses, we have Libram of Faith, which is a 6-cost holy spell that summons 3/3 Draenei with Divine Shield. If this costs 0, give them Rush. Because we have so much mana discount this time around for Librams, this probably will end up seeing some type of play, as it allows you to board clear 3 minions off of your opponent's board. However, if we want to talk about even more draw power for the deck, we have Interstellar Researcher, which has the Battlecry and Spellburst draw a Libram, which is actually probably necessary for a package deck to work to have a lot more draw power than it originally did. I'm curious if the old Librams, hint hint, will actually see more play in Wild because of all this new Libram support. And speaking of the old Libram, and then as the big payoff of the deck, we have Uriel, Beacon of Hope, a 5-cost 4-attack, 3 HP Draenei, Rush, Death Rattle, get 3 different Librams from an older timeline. It is worth mentioning with this card that those 3 Librams should be Wisdom, Hope, and Justice, I think were the names. Wisdom was a +1/+1, basically for 0 mana. Justice had a equality effect and gave you a weapon, and then Hope healed you for 8, or whatever you're targeting for 8, and gave you an 8/8 with Divine Shield and Taunt. Overall, I do think this card is actually quite potent for a big payoff for the list. Orbital Station, a 1-cost spell that discovers a Draenei. If you played an adjacent card this turn, discover another. Because you are going to be mana cheating your Librams so easily, this should be something that will easily discover you 2 cards instead of 1. And because all of the Libram support in this set are also Draenei, you should be able to get a lot of additional either mana cheat or additional copies of Uriel off of a card like this. And for the final card of the Hearthstone set, Lumia, a 6-cost 9-attack, 9 HP minion, a lifesteal. After a hero takes damage, they become immune for the rest of the turn. I honestly do not know where this fits. There's probably some weird, wacky, like, OTK list that you could probably brew up with something like this. The main problem that you're going to have with this card in particular is the fact that you're going to have to somehow protect it, and it's not going to be the easiest thing into the world to protect. You have Obsessive Fan in Standard Hearthstone, but then you have to also protect Obsessive Fan, making it a little bit weird to do so. In theory, you could use this in combination with Obsessive Fan and Amidus to keep Amidus alive, but then there's no point in having this on the board. Overall, I think this is a real gimmicky card. It might see some play in Wild. There might be some lists there, but it is just a very strange card. Alright, now let's start with the Shaman cards, starting with Farseer Nobundo, a 5-cost 6-attack, 4 HP Draenei, Death Rattle, open the Galaxy Lens. It absorbs the power of the next spell you cast. And what this is essentially Spell Burst, absorb the power of whatever spell you do cast. In theory, this card is going to be really good in like a aggro-based Shaman list, where you're going to try to duplicate maybe like Bloodlust. However, there are probably some more gimmicky ways you could use this card to full advantage, especially in Wild, where you could use it in combination with From the Other Side, which will allow you to essentially get infinite copies of the other side, which is actually really cool. We're going to also go over the other Draenei cards for Shaman, such as Planetary Navigator, a 2-cost 3 attack 2 HP Draenei. Battlecry, the next Draenei you play costs 2 less, but has Overload 2. Which in theory allows you to go even with whatever Draenei that you do slam down. However, it does allow you to cheat some of the higher cost Draenei, such as Valen or the next Draenei that will be going over out for a earlier turn, such as Cosmonaut, a 7-cost 5 attack 5 HP Draenei. That Battlecry, discover a spell from your deck, reduces cost by 5. In standard, I don't know if this has a current home, but it is actually kind of funny because, you know, the name is not. I got a card named after me without even trying, you know? Overall, I do think this has a lot of potential just because you can get out on turn 5. And in theory, if you use it in combination with some of the higher cost spells, such as Jive Insect, you might be able to do some wacky combo where you just get a complete board full of Ragnaros for like really cheap in combination with the Galaxy Lens that we went over earlier. However, let's get onto the deck that I do think has a lot more potential, which is going to be Asteroid Shaman, starting with Ultraviolent Breaker, a 3-cost 3 attack 2 HP elemental. Battlecry, deal 3 damage to an enemy minion. Shuffle 3 asteroids into your deck, which deals 2 damage to a random enemy when it is drawn. We will be seeing a lot of cards that do stuff like this. We also have Meteor Storm that does 5 damage to all minions. Shuffle 5 asteroids into your deck, along with Biolide Behemoth, which has the battle cry, your asteroids deal +1 damage for the game. Spell burst, shuffle 3 into your deck. This might not sound that powerful at first glance, but we do have Shutter Block as a way to basically make all of our asteroids have 5 damage baseline. And then you can actually combo both of those cards out on the exact same turn with a Murmur. That makes our Battlecry minions cost 1, but they immediately are destroyed after being played. Which means for a asteroid deck, you can slam down Murmur on turn 10, then a Shutter Block on turn 10, then slam down one of the Behemoths, slam down the other Shutter Block, and then slam down the other Behemoth, to be able to increase the damage of each asteroid, which could be incredibly powerful and honestly a combo that I really kind of want to try out. I do think there's going to be a lot more gimmicky cards with Murmur, but I think the elemental list or the asteroid list are probably going to be where it fits in the general meta of the Hearthstone game. Other cards for Shaman we have are Nebula, which discovers 2 8-cost minions to summon with Taunt and Elusive, which is a arcane spell for 9 mana. Probably printed to make sure that Arcane Druid isn't too consistent. And then we also do have Triangulate, a 2-cost spell that discovers a different spell from your deck. Shuffle 3 copies of it into your deck, which could be powerful depending on if there is a key spell that you want to copy multiple times, such as Wave of Nostalgia. And finally, we have First Contact, which summons 2 random 1-cost minions, Overload 1, which in theory is just powerful enough for like an aggro-based Shaman list. We're going to start off with Talgath, a 4-cost 4 attack 4 HP demon. Undamaged enemy minions take double damage. Combo, get a backstab. This card is completely unplayable. It isn't even playable when Hearthstone first released, to be honest. Overall, I do think this card is incredibly weak for 2024. And that's why we're going over it first, because we have the Starship package, which is a lot more potential for Rogue. Starting with the Gravitational Displacer, a 5-cost 4 attack 3 HP Starship piece. Whenever this is launched, summon a copy of the Starship, allowing you to get multiple copies of the Starship. And because Rogue is known for stealing cards from other classes, we got Starship Schematic, a 1-cost spell that discovers a Starship piece from another class, making the previous card have a lot higher potential, along with the Starship pieces of Scourging Shipwright that has the death rattle of get a random star piece from another class. And we also do have Barrel Roll that deals 5 damage to an undamaged character, costs 1 if you're building a starship. This actually weirdly makes Rogue the only class that does not have a starship piece outside of its legendary, and also a way to build a starship by taking pieces from other classes. Overall, I think Starship Rogue should be quite potent and is a deck that I can't wait to try out. We also do have Combo Rogue coming back with Eridar Skulker, a 2 cost 1 attack, 3 HP demon. Combo and Spellburst gain +2 attack and stealth, making it a little bit harder to destroy on any given turn. However, the most interesting card for Combo Rogue is going to be Pressure Points, a 3 cost shadow spell that deals 3 damage to a minion. Reduce the cost of combo cards in your hand by 1. And there are so many direct damaging cards that are combo cards in current standard Hearthstone that will probably make this deck quite playable, as Rogue does have a pretty consistent way to draw through most of their deck to fill it all up, and then basically cheat out a bunch of really cheap combo piece cards. We also do have access to Quasar, which shuffles your hand into your deck, reducing the cost of cards into your deck by 3, which in theory is powerful. However, it is a little bit harder to combo out with unless you have Knick-Knack Shack, where you're going to use Knick-Knack Shack to basically draw until all of the uses are up. Overall, I do think this card also has potential for a Miracle Rogue style of list, and I can't wait to try something like that out. And finally, we do have Lucky Comet for the Discover deck, which discovers a combo minion. The next one you play triggers its combo twice, and then we have all these combos possible. However, I will say this, the one that you're probably going to want to see the most is either SI Agent or Wrangler, just as a way to have 0 cost spells. Overall, again, I think Combo Rogue is going to be the more fun rogue list out of the 2 possibilities, but it might also still be missing some type of legendary support that is not Talgath. Now for the Demon Hunter cards, we're going to start with Xor'toth, a Breaker of Stars, X6 cost, 5 attack, 5 HP demon, a battle cry. Add 2 stars to both sides of your hand. When they collide, deal 5 damage to all enemies. This is an interesting card. By itself, it probably isn't worth being played. However, it is a really good top deck if you have nothing else in your hand. However, we have Eldritch Being, a 1 cost 1 attack, 3 HP minion that has the Outcast and Spellburst shuffle your hand, making that card very easy to actually trigger if you get lucky enough. Overall, I think this is going to be a weird gimmicky deck that you might be able to try out to explode multiple stars in a given game. However, I don't know how strong that style of deck is going to be, but it could be fun to try out early on. Now let's get on to the other package that Demon Hunter has access to, which is going to be Starships. The first one is going to be a Warp Drive, 3 cost, fail spell, draw 2 cards. If you're building a Starship, they cost 2 less. Great for those weird gimmicky decks that you needed a little bit of mana cheat. However, without that style of deck, this is still going to be a very potent card, especially for aggro. But if we're looking at the Starship pieces themselves, they're actually really good for aggro. Failfuse Battery is the first one. After this attacks, give your other minions +1 attack Starship piece, and then Shattered Shard Turret, a 3 cost to attack 4 HP Rush Wind Fury Starship piece, where these are meant to use in combination with each other. Essentially, it gives all your charge minions 3 attack instead of 1, which is actually quite potent. I could see this easily being included in a hybrid deck between Pirates and Starship pieces, as it does fit really well in current existing Demon Hunter lists. However, the deck that I'm most interested in when it comes to Demon Hunter is going to be the cruise ship Demon Hunter. The first card is going to be Ferrari Recruiter, a 2 cost 1 attack, 3 HP Draenei. At the end of your turn, get a random 4/4 crewmate with a random bonus effect. And essentially what these are going to do is they're going to all have the battle cry of summon all the adjoining crewmates, which means if you have a chain of them in your hand, it will summon all of them for 4 mana, and then there are going to be the stereotypical random bonus effect keywords on all of these. But we have quite a bit of cards for this deck. Headhunt is an R1, which is going to be a 1 cost spell that deals 2 damage, and then you get a random crewmate. Then we also have Emergency Meeting, the Among Us reference, a 2-cost. Get 2 random 4/4 crewmates. Put a random demon that costs 3 or less in between them, and most of the 3-cost demons in standard are quite good, so this should be pretty consistent. And finally, as the big payoff, we have Dredra Rebellion Captain, a 4-cost 4 HP 5 attack Draenei Rush Battlecry. Shuffle all 8 crewmates into your deck. Draw 1. Overall, I think this card is incredibly strong. It actually makes return policy playable. You'll be able to get multiple copies of the Battlecry since it adds that other copy of whatever Death Rattle Minion to your hand, making this a really good card to get off of that, and it does have a way to easily allow you to instantly trigger its Death Rattle by rushing it into one of your opponent's minions. Overall, I think this deck will be a lot of fun to try out, and I can't wait to do so. Now let's get on to the next class, which is going to be Druid. We're going to start with Uluu the Everdrifter, a 5-cost 6 attack 5 HP beast. Each turn this is in your hand, gain 2 random choose 1 choices. This is going to have a few exceptions. Any cards that transform themselves will be excluded. Same thing with Fate Spinner. You also will never see 2 choose 1 effects that both require a target, just to make it a little bit easier to use with Fangirl Staghelm and some of the other choose 1 cards that combine both choices. And of all the possible choices that you can get, there are actually quite a bit of ones that you would love to see. The drum circle ones would allow you to basically cheat out whatever drum circle effect for 2 cheaper mana, which is really cool. There's a lot of ways to summon additional treants and other board establishing effects. Overall, I don't know if this is going to be too playable, but it could be a real fun card to play around with. And I'm curious if this is a Discworld reference or a It reference, because both have big giant space turtles. Now let's go on to the next package, which is going to be Starship / Arcane. With Archon Adar, a 4-cost 3 attack 3 HP Draenei Battlecry. If you're building a starship, get 3 different arcane spells and reduce their cost by 2. With the cards that were in rotation before this card got revealed, this card would be incredibly strong. However, given the fact that this set is diluting the arcane pool by quite a bit, this is going to be a little less consistent. But some of the other arcane spells we'll be seeing is Final Frontier, a 7-cost arcane spell. Discover a 10-cost minion from the past, set its cost to 1. It is worth mentioning that the best opportunity here is going to be generating Thaddeus for 1 mana, which is absolutely insane. And it is also worth mentioning that it actually has an 11% odd of generating Thaddeus, which means this actually is going to be a lot more consistent than a lot of people are thinking it is. It's something that I kind of want to goof around with, maybe not week 1, but maybe early on enough, because I'm a huge fan of Thaddeus. And now let's get on to the next card, which is going to be Cosmic Phenomenon, a 5-cost arcane spell. Summon 3/2/5 elementals with taunt. If your board is full, give your minions +1/+1. I think in theory this had potential, but I don't think it has enough potential to see too much play. Stargazer is a 8-cost 8 attack 8 HP beast, elusive taunt spellburst. Give your hero +8 attack this turn and gain 8 armor. When I saw this card, I was like, I'm pretty sure we're going to see in the mini set a card that doubles every spell burst that you have. Overall, if Dorian wasn't nerfed, I think this card would have been quite playable, but currently it is going to be a little bit harder to use for its full potential, which might make it a little bit less playable. Then some other arcane spells, Astral Phaser, a 2-cost arcane spell that chooses 1, deal 2 damage to 2 random enemy minions, or make 1 dormant for 2 turns. This is a card out of like 2014. It's horrible. We also have Distress Signal, that is a 4-cost arcane spell that summons 2 random 2-cost minions, refresh 2 mana crystals, so essentially it costs 2 instead of 4. I think this one has potential. It's one of the actual better cards for Druid in the set, and that's not saying that much. And then finally, for the last arcane spell, we have Arcanite Revelation, a 1-cost arcane spell that draws 1 card. If it is a spell, it costs 1 less. This is the most playable card in the entire set for Druid. But we also do have the Starships. The first one is going to be Shatar Cloakfield, a 2-cost 1 attack 3 HP minion that gives your Starship elusive, and your first spell costs 1 less, which in theory could be powerful if you can get enough of these on your single starship, but I think this is just not going to be playable. And the other one we have is Starlight Reactor, a 3 cost, 3 attack, 3 HP starship piece that after you cast an arcane spell, recast it. Targets chosen randomly. I think this is the reason why we're getting a bunch of arcane spells that don't actually directly target anything on your opponent's board, but I also think this is completely unplayable in any existing arcane druid list. DK, but we're going to start with the 8 Hands from Beyond, a 8 cost, 8 attack, 8 HP beast battlecry. Destroy both players' decks except for the 8 highest cost cards in each. And then the signature is going to look like Starro from DC Comics. Honestly, this is going to be one of those gimmicky cards that I really want to try out. It is something that you could easily tutor off of Cattle Rancher, which could be really cool. And besides that, in theory, well, 90% of the time, it is going to ruin your chances of winning the game because your opponent is always going to have that boom boss to remove all of the cards from your deck. Outside of that, though, in other matchups, this could be really fun, especially if you get off of Rustler, as it is a beast and you don't normally run any other beast in DK. Overall, I'm really excited to try some type of mill DK list out. But the other DK lists are also going to be pretty interesting. Exarch Maladaar is a 6 cost, 5 attack, 5 HP Draenei Battlecry. The next card you play this turn costs corpses instead of mana. Well, Climactic Necrotic Explosion is going to be a 0 mana card that will self-buff itself up, depending on how that actually works in interaction. It's also worth mentioning that also means you might be able to get multiple copies of that card out on the single turn, being able to easily OTK your opponent. Overall, this card fits perfectly in the already existing Rainbow DK list, so I can't see a world where this doesn't see any type of play. And the other card that perfectly fits into Rainbow DK is going to be Airlock Breach, a 6 cost, 1 unholy, 1 blood spell that summons a 5/5 undead with taunt. Give your hero plus 5 health. Spend 5 corpses to do it again, which means you no longer have any reason to run triple rune blood DK because Rainbow DK is going to just be able to do the job much better. It kind of does demonstrate the fact that the rune system was a huge mistake. However, if we're talking about non-rune cards, let's get on to the starship pieces. The first one is going to be Soulbound Spire, a 3 cost, 2 attack, 2 HP. Minion with Death Rattle, summon a minion with cost equal to this minion's attack up to 10. Starship piece, which by itself doesn't sound that powerful. However, with the other starship piece, Guiding Figure, has a spell burst of trigger a random friendly minions a death rattle in combination with each other, should allow you to get a bunch of 10 cost minions really easily, just for free whenever you do establish a big starship. You also have Yelling Yodeler as a way to double or triple the death rattle of these. Honestly speaking, Starship DK looks like it's going to be one of the more powerful starship lists, and I can't wait to actually try it out. There are a few other cards worth mentioning here. We have Akanai Death Speaker, a 1 cost, 1 attack, 3 HP Draenei. After another friendly minion is reborn, summon a copy of it. In theory, really good. I just don't know the home for it right now. Overall, I do think this card has a lot of potential in the... We also do have Awakener of Souls. That is a 10 cost card that has 8 attack, 7 HP. That has Taunt, Reborn, Death Rattles, Resurrect a different friendly Death Rattle minion. I'm very curious of how this will work in combination with the starships. If you'll just be able to infinitely revive your huge starship, that will give you more additional 10 cost minions. And honestly, that deck feels like a deck that I really want to try out week 1. We also have Suffocate for the starship decks, which destroys a minion, and if you're building a starship, it destroys a random neighbor, which is decent. Then we have Orbital Moon that gives a minion taunt and lifesteal. If you played an adjacent card this turn, also give it Reborn, making the Reborn card a little bit more playable than previously thought. And finally, we also have Assimilating Blight that discovers a random 3 cost Death Rattle minion, summon it with Reborn. And honestly, all of these Death Rattle minions are pretty bad, so you're probably never going to want to play something like this. All right, let's get on to the next class, which is going to be Warrior. Starting with Spore Empress Modlara, a 6 cost 6 attack 7 HP minion. With start of game, shuffle 7 replicating spores into your deck, which are going to be 5 cost spells that summon a random 5 cost minion, and then the next one will summon whatever the previous minions that you summoned off of the previous spores are, plus another minion, making this actually pretty good for that line cook Shafar list that I put together in the last week, as it does allow you to easily run additional minions in the deck without directly running them, making it where you can easily cut something like Marin out of the list as a way to have some type of early game board so you can keep up with your opponent. Overall, I think this is going to be a gimmicky card and probably not the most playable card, but it could be a lot of fun, and we'll be seeing a lot of cards for like Swarm Warrior later on. And speaking of one of them, we have Dwarf Planet, which is a 10 cost spell that fills your board with random 2 cost minions that attack random enemies, which in theory is good. However, I think honestly this had to be either 3 cost minions for 10 mana for it to be too playable, but the signature rare on this is just hilarious to look at. Now let's go on to the next cards. First one is going to be Archon Akama, a 5 cost 3 attack 6 HP Draenei. After this attacks, all other friendly minions can attack again, which means all your minions have Wind Fury. There is going to be a way to OTK with this. Mark my words, I'm going to find that deck. I already have some ideas for it, and you might be wondering, how are you going to get an attack on the same turn you play it down? You have the 0 cost spell, but you also have Exhibition Sergeant, a 3 cost 3 attack 4 HP Draenei. Battlecry, the next Draenei you play immediately attacks a random enemy, meaning that Akama will be able to give all your minions Wind Fury on any turn you do slam them down, and then if you somehow have the 0 cost spell where it gives that minion a rush, you should be able to attack with them for a third time for an easy OTK using either Leroy or a Grom that you have buffed up through Black Rock and Roll. We also do have a bunch of other Draenei warrior cards, such as Crystalline Great Mace, which after your hero attacks, give all Draeneis in your hand +2 attack, which is quite potent with some of the other Draeneis. We have Stewart Avenger, a 4 cost 7 attack 2 HP Draenei, immune while attacking. At the end of each turn, swap this minion's attack and health. Unyielding Vindicator, a 4 cost 5 attack 4 HP Draenei. Battlecry, the next Draenei you play, gives it attack to your hero. Now that could be very potent, especially with Ignis floating around. And finally, for the last Draenei support card, we have Captain's Log, which draws 2 cards, costs 1 less for each Draenei you control. There is going to be a Tempo Draenei warrior list. However, I really do want to focus on the more OTK route, just because I think that will be a lot more fun. And then the last card we have is Hostile Invader, a 5 cost 3 attack 5 HP demon. Battlecry, Spellburst, Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to all other minions, which is cool. I just don't know how playable it is going to be. And I almost forgot about Jettison, which is a 2 cost spell that discovers a spell, spend 2 armor to discover another, which is good for just random decks that you need to discover additional armor gain or anything else. All right, let's get on to the next class, which is going to be Mage. We're going to start with Exarch Hataaru, a 5 cost 5 attack 5 HP Draenei. Battlecry, discover a spell and reduce its cost by 1. If you play it this turn, repeat this, which is actually probably an effect that will allow you to get multiple cards, as you're probably going to always choose the lowest cost spell. I do think this might cost a little bit too much to be seen play by itself. However, there is going to be another Draenei for Mage, the Ingenious Artificer, a 5 cost 4 attack 6 HP Draenei. Battlecry, the next Draenei you play, refreshes mana crystals equals to its attack. So essentially, the Exarch is going to cost 0 since it is a 5 attack minion, making any combination with that card late on into a game really powerful. And the other Draenei card we see is Archwing Pilot, a 7 cost 4 attack 3 HP Draenei. At the end of your turn, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. Spellburst, summon a Archwing Pilot, which in theory should allow you to just chain them together. Very similar to how old Grim Patron worked, except with instead of taking damage, you are just going to have to cast a bunch of really cheap spells. Overall, I think this deck has a little bit potential. I don't think it's going to be the best Draenei list in Standard, but it is probably going to be one of the more fun ones. But the other deck, the one that I'm more excited for, is going to be Elemental Fire Mage. Blazing Accelerant is a 3-cost, 3-attack, 1 HP elemental. Battlecry, destroy the top 3 cards of your deck. Any fire spells or elementals are drawn instead, which is great draw power for a deck that already had enough draw power to keep up with everything else. And it does have an additional way to play the deck now, because we're going to be wanting to run fire cards, including Solar Flare, a 5-cost fire spell that deals 2 damage to all enemies, costs 1 less for each elemental you control. And then we also have for fire spell Spontaneous Combustion, which is a 2-cost fire spell that deals 4 damage to a random enemy. If you played an elemental last turn, choose the target, which is great for a burn elemental list, especially given the fact that Saruun, a 6-cost, 7-attack, 6 HP elemental. Battlecry, give all elementals in your deck fire damage +1, making it where the insidious Eruptor that summons copies of itself for every turn that you've slammed down an elemental in a row will give you +7 spell damage on any fire spell that you will be playing down on the same turn. And that should be a very easy thing to combo out, because a lot of these fire spells do have a really low mana cost, except for Supernova, which fills your hand with random fire spells and they all cost 1, which could be a card that you still run in that deck just to set it up on a previous turn and then spam out a bunch of really cheap fire spells. It's also worth mentioning that this will not be able to generate itself, but there are a lot of really good direct and damaging fire spells that could make this really frustrating. Honestly, I'm amazed it took it this long for Blizzard to combine Fire Mage with Elemental Mage, because it does seem like union that would perfectly fit well together. And Fire Mage is really unexplored, in my opinion, in Hearthstone currently. Hello, my treasures! All the cards for the Great Dark Beyond have been revealed, so that means let's go over the other half of the cards that I haven't talked about yet. We're going to be starting with the newest cards first, and then going with the oldest ones last. So let's begin